Hola digital world, welcome back once again to another episode of Spliced In Later. A very exciting week for you. We will be having 2 episodes this week. Be sure to tune in later this week when I give you my review of Jurassic World Dominion. I'm interested to see it, but apprehensive. I have had a love-hate relationship with this franchise, and I'd very much like to see how this whole thing comes to an end. But a normal episode this week, and for our content, we are diving back into a regular topic here on Spliced In Later. We are looking into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If regular listeners will know, this is my favorite thing to talk about. I love it. I love the whole franchise, the way it has built itself across different franchises and characters, different mediums, establishing a world that relies on each other but also manages to be completely accessible through different mediums. Since starting this podcast, we've been approaching it 2 different ways. Either our review, the new content that MCU has been releasing pretty much starting from 2021, where they hit the ground running after the pandemic, having been unable to release some stuff during that time. 2021 saw 4 movies released, and thanks to now having Disney Plus and working in a combined setting in that regard, 5 television shows in 2021. So that's 9 different mediums for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's a lot of stuff. It keeps me busy. There's been 2 this year already, and the last couple of days there's been announced for an animated show with Groot's premiering in August. The She-Hulk show's premiering in August. There's a lot coming. It's exciting. Or we go back in time and we look back at the early days of the MCU, the building blocks, back when there was no giant behemoth of a franchise, and it really was just establishing some origin stories here and there for Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, Captain America, relatively unknown superheroes in the movie medium. If you weren't a Marvel fan, I think your knowledge was Spider-Man and the X-Men. And building towards an idea of hopefully one day uniting all these characters together into one team-up movie for the Avengers, which they succeeded with. We've now passed that point. We've been going along chronologically. We're at the point now where after the Avengers, the goal was to return our superheroes to their own franchises, their own trilogies, and be able to tell separate stories that don't rely on team-ups to pull everybody in together. As such, our last topic was Iron Man 3. Now we're at that point where the success of the Avengers, obviously, there was a bit more confidence behind the scenes at Marvel Studios, the people involved. There was an idea of expanding beyond movies. And the approach was from there. The next logical step is obviously TV shows. Now, this was a time well before Disney Plus or a combined Marvel Studios conglomerate headed by Kevin Feige that looked at every single movie and TV show and had a specific plan for each of them and how they would relate to each other. The TV shows were looked at as more a complementary force, something that would keep everybody aware of the MCU and appreciating it year-round, but not in a give-take persona. Essentially, TV shows would be set in the world of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and reference the movies and big events that were happening during that time, but the movies would never be affected or have to relate to anything going on in the TV world. It was a give but no take relationship. It was also outsourced, so Marvel made deals with the network ABC, made some deals with Netflix, Freeform, Hulu, all these different streaming services to create all these different little TV shows. The one we are talking about today, the very first one that kicked it off quite logically, was Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D, which ran for a solid 7 years, from 2013 to 2020, and one of my most favorite TV shows of all time, which we'll get to in a point. It was obviously the logical one to start with. They'd introduced the concept of S.H.I.E.L.D, the secret spy organization that had been operating alongside all the Marvel superheroes leading up to the Avengers, obviously headed by Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury, but we met a couple of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents along the way in the other movies, Clark Gregg's Phil Coulson, Kobe Smulders' Maria Hill. So it was approached as a sort of procedural type show, not unlike NCIS and FBI and FBI Most Wanted, all those different cop shows where the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. themselves would have to investigate a unknown phenomenon or something of that regard every single week. And as they would go along, the movies that were coming out alongside it would reflect into how they would approach the world. So, for example, Thor: The Dark World comes out during the first couple episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So, for fun, they had to do cleanup for Thor's movie, and some leftover stuff from Thor's movie would influence that episode of the week. But otherwise, they had to come up with their own characters, their own storylines, their own running theme or arc that would go for the whole season. And it relied heavily on knowledge, in the beginning at least, of, I know this character. It's headed by our good friend Phil Coulson. We all love Phil Coulson from the Avengers and Iron Man and Thor and all of those appearances. Now, before we get into talking about it, I want to address the elephant in the room when it comes to talking about these old TV shows, which is how they have been essentially retconned or pushed aside in the wake of the Kevin Feige, president of all things Marvel Studios, turning all the movies and TV shows into one corporation and approaching TV shows as limited series on Disney Plus and stuff like that, taking away all the rights that they'd given to ABC and Netflix and all of that stuff as well, and focusing on just one specified point of origin point for all these different things. Meaning, for example, there's a brand for the MCU which, while was still kept relatively the same for all these different TV shows, they varied in genre to appeal to different crowds. For example, the Netflix shows, the Street Heroes, Daredevil, Jessica Jones, they were a lot more violent, a lot more adult. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was more of a family-friendly type show. But at the end of the day, all these different shows used all these different characters. As I said, with the movie relationship, that they never really crossed into the movies themselves. And now they're at a point where they want to use them in the movies. There's been decisions that they will take these characters and reintroduce them into the MCU, and as such, retcon the past. We don't really know exactly what's going on. For example, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5, Season 6 came out around the time Avengers Infinity War happened. Slight spoilers for Infinity War if you do not know. That movie ended on a terrible cliffhanger where Thanos wiped out half the universe. The end of Season 5 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. alludes that this is about to happen. However, S.H.I.E.L.D. obviously cannot take a break for a year while it waits for Endgame to come out and reset everybody back to normal. It has to keep making the show because it's a network program. So it continues on as if it hasn't happened, which creates plot holes and loopholes and things like that. Cloak and Dagger came out during the snap. Daredevil, Jessica Jones, all these different shows were still going on. So it became less intricate. And it was very much the people behind the movies didn't really care because they did not owe anything to the TV shows. It was in the TV shows that had to always try and relate to the movies and what was going on and affect it in their show. So the lines got very murky. It became a point where it was just, these exist in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Doesn't really matter when, it's just that they were there. But now that we're creating these bigger TV shows with movie-like budgets where we can use Scarlet Witch and Vision in their own show and Bucky and Sam, characters like Daredevil and Ghost Rider and all these other B-tier Marvel superheroes, they want to reintroduce and bring them back into it. But they are limited if they count everything that happened in the old TV shows as canon. Some characters died. Some swapped between good and evils. Some have had their stories told. So I'm not exactly sure what the approach is going in here. It seems to be with Daredevil's appearance in Spider-Man No Way Home and Kingpin's appearance in Hawkeye, and even another character's appearance in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, that there at least is a recognition of these TV shows in terms of recasting the same characters, but it seems like they're going to reboot them or retell their stories, which means whether these shows are canon or not is completely up in the air. For me personally, doing this show, which is what I wanted to say briefly, but I babbled on for about 4 or 5 minutes here, is that me looking back on the MCU as a whole, as its evolution from Iron Man to this point, I count all these shows as being part of MCU canon because they are. They were made with that purpose. They were made by the design. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was absolutely a companion piece to the MCU films that came out during its first 5-year run. The Netflix shows, they all reference the Battle of New York. They reference Hulk. They talk about S.H.I.E.L.D. and Strike and Hammer technology and all these different things. And they were designed to be in that world. And even at this point now where we're going, okay, they don't exist anymore, but these do, you cannot ignore their existence. And you cannot ignore how they reflect a certain period of the MCU, a time where they were trying new things, they were seeing what would work and what didn't. And now we're in the part of the MCU where the multiverse exists. At the very least, you can say this exists in the MCU thanks to the multiverse. It may not have happened on our Earth, but it happens on an Earth relatively very similar to the MCU with just a few differences here and there. And that's where you might go, oh, okay, you include the TV shows as part of the MCU, but not the old Spider-Man movies, even though they appeared in No Way Home and they're a part of the multiverse. Shut up, is my response to that. No, anything that was created before the MCU, which it seems to be as we're going forward, the old Spider-Man movies, the old X-Men movies, the old Fantastic Four movies, however much they reference them and bring in those characters played by the same actors, those movies were created not originally to be a part of the MCU. Venom as well, that's another example. Bringing them in doesn't add them to it, in my opinion. They're adjacent. These shows, they were created originally to be a part of the MCU. They were created by Marvel Studios in a way. They have characters from the movies and the TV shows. They reference each other. They cross over quite frequently. So for me, they're a part of it. Which means going forward, we will be talking about them all. Agent Carter and Inhumans on ABC. Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, The Punisher, The Defenders on Netflix. Cloak and Dagger on Freeform. Runaways on Hulu. Bloody Hellstrom, whatever the hell that was. We'll be talking about all that too. Because it's good stuff. There's a lot of really good things in here that are great content. At the very least, everybody should check him out if they haven't seen him. And also, they just reflect a period of the MCU. And they did happen, in my opinion. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's properly talk about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is a great TV show. I remember when it was first announced it was coming out in 2013, and I had mixed feelings because one, I like MCU, it was great. The idea of an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show sounded interesting. But two, they said it was going to star Clark Gregg as Phil Coulson, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Slight spoiler for the Avengers, Phil Coulson died in that, and his death was quite instrumental to the plot of the Avengers. It essentially influenced how the Avengers came together as a team. So I was worried that they just went, oh, well, we're just going to pretend that he didn't really die. Nick Fury lied, he's fine, Coulson's just going to go about doing his own thing, which I thought undermined that sacrifice. But I should have trusted the people behind it because you start the show and there's a mystery to Coulson about why he is alive. Did he die? Or was it a lie? There's something there. There's more to the mystery than just, oh, he was fine all along. Those early days of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they set up a pretty solid small team of characters to work for Coulson. He had his martial arts expert, the cavalry, Melinda May, the pretty boy action hero agent sidekick, Grant Ward, the mystery new character, Skye, who her origins, everything about her was completely unknown other than she was just a computer hacker, and Techno Geek and Dr. Fitz and Simmons, which had a bubbly, romantic dorkiness to them. Those early days, it was very much a case of the week thing. The Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. would go somewhere, they'd find some tech or an alien or some evil villain, and they would deal with that in accordance, and they were building their relationship as a family and all that. Fairly standard stuff. It wasn't anything particularly exciting. I liked the characters. I didn't love them in those first early days. It was interesting to see what they were doing, but it was never this week's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I can't wait. Until about episode 15 of season 1, which I won't say exactly what happens because we're spoiling stuff I haven't talked about yet. But Captain America, the Winter Soldier came out around that time. And S.H.I.E.L.D. as an organization changed dramatically thanks to what happened in that movie. To a point that I remember watching that movie and going, how can Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. operate as a show after what has just happened here? And what happened was, a result of that incident in Winter Soldier, completely changed the whole concept of the show, the direction, the theme, the vibes. Characters completely changed. Directions, relationships, it all just went completely up in the air and out the window, and it really pumped up the show in a way I didn't expect it could. Looking back, I don't know if they knew that. I don't know if they started Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. knowing that that was going to happen in Winter Soldier and that their show would be a different show by the end of it. Or if they got the message halfway through and went, okay, right, cool, well, that sounds interesting, we can work with that. I don't know. But it benefited the show wholeheartedly, because from season 2 onwards, the seriousness of the situation, the way S.H.I.E.L.D. operated, Coulson as a character, as a leader, the characters of May and Ward and Skye and Fitz and Simmons, they all completely revitalized and rechanged, and it was a complete new direction for the show, and I loved it. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. just only got better and better each season onwards. Side note, I won't be talking about every season separately. It's not like this discussion here is season 1 of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's just a brief overview of the show and just why it's good, and it's worth just starting at the point where the first season kicked off. Each season had a different arc, a different story to tell, different Marvel characters to interact with, different repercussions for the characters involved. They introduced new Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., new characters that went along, whether it was Bad Boy Lance Hunter or Mockingbird Bobby Morse, or everybody's favorite hulking tough guy Mac, or Inhuman Lincoln, or robot building Dr. Radcliffe, or very fast Inhuman Yo-Yo, or even some jerk from the future Deke. They kept building on that roster of characters, and they made you connect with all these people, whether they were main characters or they flitted in and out. I personally liked the character of Glenn Talbot on the show, and I thought where he ended up at the end of a 5-season arc was one of the most emotional parts of the show, without a doubt. By the end of season 5, it reached a natural conclusion. I think they thought they were done, but S.H.I.E.L.D. was very popular, had a very, very, very popular fan base, so it got renewed for another 2 years after that, which is where the canosity connection with MCU started to falter a bit in terms of what was going on in the movies and what was going on in the TV shows. Again, I thought that was a bad idea. I personally thought the ending of S.H.I.E.L.D. was good and it didn't need to go on any further, and I was wrong. Season 6 was okay, but Season 7 was one of the best seasons of TV I've ever seen. And this time really introduced me to my new favorite character from the show, Enoch, who was never a main character, but he was a robot who assisted the S.H.I.E.L.D. and he was just wonderful. Loved his character. Great stuff. At the end of the day, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is probably the best of the TV shows that were made for the MCU that are no longer canon on a technical standpoint. In terms of criticalness, some of the Netflix shows are better. But in terms of the original goal of what they wanted to do with these TV shows that lived in the MCU, reacted to the things that were going on in the show, but still had their own stories to tell and their own characters that would become beloved in everybody's eyes, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was the only one that was truly successful in that. Captain America and Iron Man go to war in Civil War. The S.H.I.E.L.D. agents have to deal with that and how it affects the Inhumans characters on their show. The Avengers need help fighting Ultron. Luckily, the super secret other S.H.I.E.L.D. that had shown up in Season 2 had some skills and some weapons that were needed to help them out. The characters just became wonderful. He bonded with them on an emotional level that you would not expect from in the beginning. The character of Ward went on quite the character journey during the show. Not only that, Skye as a character evolved from just being a mystery computer hacker into a superhero in her own right. Fitz went from just a dorky science geek to one of the most tragic figures I've ever seen on television. And Coulson was always there as the stoic leader. I mean, Clark Gregg, he really embodied that character. There was obviously a point when we first met Coulson in Iron Man and Thor, you knew. It was like, this is a really likable person, and I like watching him. I didn't think he could headline his own TV show. I was wrong. Now, I highly recommend Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. As a whole run, it gets an 8 out of 10. It is a fun watch to go through, especially now when you don't have to wait week after week for a new episode. Because Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., each season always had a fantastic, strong finish, but they always started out slow. Season 4 starts out slow with the whole Ghost Rider thing, but by the end where everybody's trapped in a simulation, It's perfect stuff. Same with season 3, same with season 2. It takes a while to get going, but by the end, you're just completely pulled in and wrapped with attention at the storyline, at the arc, at the villain, at the implication on the characters, and where it's going to lead into next season. Season 5 has a great ending, even though it wasn't the ending, and season 7 has a great ending, and that was the ending. And there's still some crossovers with some other TV shows as well that managed to work perfectly. And the fact that Edwin Jarvis from Agent Carter showed up in Avengers Endgame after all this talk about how the TV shows aren't canon anymore means, I don't know. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes and how they look at this stuff. But Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., in my opinion, will always be canon. And it is an impressive show that highlights those first early days of MCU tackling television. When you look at Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and then you look at the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you can see that they learnt from the things that did work and the things that didn't work. There you are. So that's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I don't know if I gave a whole rating for the show. I don't know if I can because each season is a bit different. And if I already did, doesn't matter. But it's good stuff. Definitely worth checking out. Definitely worth buying on DVD if you don't have it, or at least watching on Disney Plus, which it's all there. All there. Nestled amongst all the other MCU stuff. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. ready to watch. So check it out. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed. I do enjoy going back and looking at the olden days of the MCU. I was excited to get to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because we're getting into the point now when we're not just talking about just the same movies, the same characters over and over again. We're getting to a point where soon we'll be talking about the Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man and Doctor Strange, etc., etc. And we're getting into the point now with the TV shows. And some of these Netflix shows, oh boy, they are a lot. Whether it's very good, Jessica Jones, or very bad, Iron Fist. Those were barely coughs. Anyway, I'll be back in a couple of days to review Jurassic World Dominion. I'm very excited to do that, and I hope you are excited to hear that. If not, that's okay. Please listen anyway. And I will catch you then. But until then, I love and appreciate you all as always. You've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.